If you don't know boundaries, you've never set them, and you're not thinking about them, they have been set. They are there. They're in a subconscious, unaware place. And maybe you're not aware of the way that they're contributing to your relationships, but they are definitely there.
Welcome to the Quarter Life Lessons podcast,
A show on the relatable lessons learned on the journey to and through adulthood. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm CharLea. Let's get started. What is going on, Thrivers? Thank you so much for tuning in. This episode is one that we've been hinting on since recording our very first episode, and it is all about boundaries. Dun dun dun. So, Steph, I know that we had talked previously, but as of right now, what is your understanding of what a boundary is?
Yeah, I think my lived experience definition of a boundary, certainly not something I've researched or been instructed in formally, but my definition of a boundary would just be a parameter that you set for your energy or your focus that makes sure you're not being taken advantage of or keeps things in alignment with your values.
Yeah. Absolutely. And boundaries has become kind of a buzzword, especially in my career field. So we'll talk about a little bit of psychoeducation as well as what a boundary is officially, according to Very Well Health, and how to create them and use them. Like Stephanie just mentioned, we will talk about our personal experiences and just some things that we've learned around creating healthy boundaries. Steph, you mentioned that it's kind of like something you use, boundaries, or something you use for like protection. And I'm interested to hear more about where are you currently in that space?
Yeah, I want to get more clear and defined around boundaries, but I think I know that I need to create them a little bit better to make sure that I'm having nice work-life balance, to make sure that I'm not seeking attention or value from the wrong places. So I don't think up to this point in my life I've had very clear boundaries. Certainly just when I started to feel like things weren't in my best interest, I would make a change. That's a super informal definition of boundaries. And I'm realizing that I think I need to be a bit more intentional with them.
That's awesome that you just stated the word clear, because that is a type of boundary that we will discuss. So great job already being super educated on, wanting to learn more of how to make boundaries more clear, because that is actually representative of a healthy boundary. And, for me, I very recently am learning about how to set healthy boundaries. Again, I just wasn't really feeling content in most of my friendships and relationships. It's because I'm overdoing it. I'm overexerting myself and then expecting a lot of the same from others when, that may not be rational for me to be doing. So it's really important to, have that intention and clarity like you're talking about. My childhood was not very representative of clinical healthy boundaries in that way. Boundaries was kind of like a bad word in my house. It's seen as like a disloyal action, and and we'll talk about enmeshment, which is what that is. It's when the feelings are dependent on actions of others, which we can clear up a little bit later. But for now, I definitely want to talk about the 3 different types of boundaries that there are. And this, again, is according to Very Well Health. They don't sponsor us, but it'd be cool if they did, if they ever see this. So, the first one is rigid. And I think this is the one that, if I had any guidance on a boundary previously to working in mental health, or if there was anything that I did and thought it was a boundary, it would have unfortunately been rigid. And that's a boundary that's closed and inflexible. And it's like a wall. You're not letting anything in or out. And there's not a lot of engagement that can occur in a boundary like this. It's more isolating. It's certainly more isolating. It's like a floor to ceiling wall. that, nothing's getting through. And again, this is usually when it's in the form of like protection and safety. Um, do you understand like where I'm coming from when I say rigid?
Yeah, totally. I mean, maybe it's something you're not even aware you're doing. It's that ubiquitous, that rigid. You're not even asking yourself questions about it. Probably could be subconscious
Right.
almost, or so intentional, maybe associated with a bunch of fear and trauma that it is just, um, what do you call, like, you cannot pass it. And it may
Yeah.
be something you do directly or maybe even subconsciously. That makes sense.
Yeah, and that's something I had to learn too. Like, in order for a boundary to be healthy, some sort of flexibility or not necessarily malleability, like you're not trying to get past the boundary, but adaptations are healthy in boundaries. Didn't know that until probably the last 4 months. um, so absolutely, it's more common than we think. And again, we can talk about some examples later on, but I definitely struggle with, making the boundary rigid. And I'm looking forward to even doing the research for this episode, just gaining more skills of how to um, allow for some more flexibility there. So the other type of boundary that I've probably had more of is called an open boundary. So this is not clear and it's loose. And I thought it was interesting that they used the word loose instead of just like, like they're not saying flexible, because flexible is what we want, but loose is just like unconnected, like it's very much so inconsistent.
Mm.
And yeah, it changes on a situational basis, but not in a way that flexibility would, if that makes sense. Is that making sense to you, Steph?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. So what you're saying is the loose, non-consistent boundary maybe is not even, it's not intentional at all. Whereas flexibility, it would allow you to decide when to hold or modify the boundary, very conscious. The same way that maybe a rigid boundary is subconscious, maybe a loose boundary is the same in that it's not intentional and not associated with conscious choice.
Exactly. It's like the other side of the same coin. So
Yeah,
it's just honestly like more manipulative than anything, because you're going to change the boundary in order to get whatever it is that you want out of the situation, if that makes sense. And that's
sure.
without, collaboration or, like meeting the middle ground. It's really just unorganized and inconsistent. And usually, this is what happens a lot in enmeshed relationships, which is again, it's that emotional dependence. It's that I won't be happy until you do X, Y, Z. And then that X, Y, Z is ever changing. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Yeah. So it's enmeshment overall is just the lack of emotional independence, which is also healthy. That I'm learning, there is such thing as, you know, having your feelings hurt by other people's actions, but it's different than depending on their actions to have certain feelings.
Yeah, I heard it explained recently that there is dependence and independence, but that healthy relationships have a combination of those traits and create healthy intradependence.
Yes, yes, it works together,
Yeah.
opposed to, um, the only way to get to my XYZ is from you doing these certain things.
Hmm.
And that's another thing that's important that I learned about boundaries is it's really not about what other people are doing. It's about what you will do if XYZ, not in a way to threaten. So let me give you an example. And I mean, other people don't even have to necessarily be in the process of you creating the boundary. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary, but specifically in this instance, it won't matter too much. So, like with friends, for example, I'm often in one sided relationships where it feels like I'm doing all the work. I'm making all the plans. I'm putting in all or most of the effort, and the other person just gets to show up. Well, I don't want to do that anymore. So let's say I plan a, I don't know, day out, or I plan for us to go to the spa together or something. Uh, if I don't hear from that person, I'll reach out to check in on them, but I won't be initiating the next thing unless it's like their birthday or maybe, or like maybe they're going through a, hardship, and I know them and I understand that, usually they would reciprocate, but in this specific scenario that's not happening for whatever reason. So usually for me, if I'm the one putting in overexerting, or what I feel like is overexerting, I will let the other person take lead whenever that is. So, after I check in on you, I don't really hear anything. Like, I will continue to love you for who you are, and, continue to appreciate your friendship and what you have to offer, but I won't continue to extend what I have to offer, because at that point it will be at a detriment to myself.
That makes total sense. I think you touched on some really important things. And I think first of all, this example feels like your definition of the middle ground, not a rigid boundary, not a loose boundary, but one that is a parameter on your energy and focus that you are able to consciously choose to be flexible with. So good job. And then second, I just have to say I completely resonate with the things that you're saying about in certain relationships where I have become attached for some reason or dependent upon the other person's validation or engagement to give me something. When that doesn't happen and I feel overextended, anxiety sets in. Then I'm angry and I'm unable to really support and love that person from a distance and give them the space that maybe they need, because I'm wondering, why did this happen? What's wrong with me? What's going on in their life that I'm not important? And that really comes back to the self-worth things that
Right.
I've been working on. But anyway, to go back to the boundary isn't to keep people from hurting you. Maybe it's more about the way that you structure your energy and your focus and your emotions so that you're not putting them in the wrong place or abandoning yourself and then left with the challenges associated with compromising yourself.
Exactly. And that's what I mean by the boundary at that point is about me. It's about my further action opposed to trying to control what they're going to do. They might not ever respond, they might not ever initiate something. And that means we might not ever hang out again. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. But, I'm also okay with making sure that I'm only putting forth effort to places where I know that it's going to be synergetic. That's just something that I require, especially because, again, as a recovering people pleaser, I can really get out of hand with, all the energy and effort that I give to people and get nothing in return. There just needs to be, for me, there needs to be some sort of payout in relationships. And it's better if, we can give that to each other. I'm not saying that if they initiate it, I'm not doing anything. Like, okay, well, pick me up and, we'll figure it out. Like, no, like, I will then contribute as well to the plan so that neither one of us is feeling that one sidedness. And like you said, that's, an example of what is labeled as a clear boundary. This is a one that you want. A clear boundary is directly stated, it's flexible, and it's adaptable. And there's warmth and support and stability within these relationships, but also you're allowed to be assertive and communicate your needs, as well as develop what it is that you want out of the relationship. And I think it's important that when you're hinting on the want out of a relationship, that's very much so a collaborative thing. As relationships are usually two-sided or multi-sided for whoever's involved. So their wants as well as your wants can be met in a fashion that is reciprocating.
Yeah, I love that. You talked about synergy. We've talked about kind of protecting your energy and choosing your focus. Those all sound like very similar practices. Um, But I think the other thing is, and hopefully the Thrivers have either mastered this already or maybe will be inspired to work on this after this episode, and that is when you're not living with these intentional choices around your energy and your focus, I do think there's a tendency to cope by trying to earn or prove your value to other people. And these boundaries are maybe a way that you're doing that. Um, Overextending yourself to earn love and validation, or holding yourself separate and avoiding things to protect yourself from difficulties, rejection, abandonment, things like that. So it's like the middle ground is right where you want to be. And if you find yourself in either of the other two scenarios, either the overly rigid or the completely loose, ask yourself, what is the outcome, the result of my behavior in those scenarios, and if that is making me feel good about myself or not. And then, depending on that answer, you may find yourself trying to create more boundaries to maximize your energy so that you can pour some of that energy into yourself and take care of yourself and find your self love and value, and also have super healthy interdependent relationships with other people.
Yeah, I think from what you said, I'm hearing that being able to communicate your needs is extremely important, as well as having them met. Now, doing so in other ways by overexerting yourself, or, by, just having the loose, or having the full wall up boundaries is maladaptive. And that
Mhm.
that word is meaning like it's coping, but it's coping in a way that is producing a negative outcome. And there are definitely times in life that maladaptive coping works for us, and there's also times in life where the mal in the word maladaptive, meaning bad, is outweighing the benefit. And it's important for us to look back and really reflect on when or if that is happening. Um, that's a great point to segue on. Stephanie is stating, the why, the intent, because that's actually a part of how to set clear boundaries. And the article states that setting a clear boundary is starting small, as well as understanding what the overall outcome and intention is. And that's so important because there's been a lot of times where I've communicated something and it's come off in the wrong tone. And maybe the person is able to like get to the understanding later on, but I do want to work on the skill myself of being able to deliver it clearly the first time with the intention involved. And some of that I didn't do out of fear of the need getting unmet, fear of losing out on that relationship, and fear of not having my needs be valuable. Was definitely a reason why I tiptoed around things, and that's why I didn't have clear boundaries, was because um, I certainly didn't believe at that time, or at times in the past, that I deserved to have those things valuable. So instead, again, maladaptively, I'm delivering it in an assertive way, or I'm delivering it in a way that is going to have a negative outcome, um, in order to get the need met, rather than putting myself in safe places and in safe relationships that allow for that to happen organically.
Mm. Yeah, gosh, when you start to analyze this stuff, you realize how much is happening at the unconscious level.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's funny, the term conscious and unconscious, I used to think that those were, and they are complex terms, and then we have words like intentional, right? And conscious, I guess, just means aware. Conscious is when you choose safe people, you let yourself be secure enough in yourself to be vulnerable that you can tell someone what you need and what's hurting you, and secure enough that if they cannot provide that or meet that, that you're okay and that you can go pursue another relationship that can meet your needs and allow safety for your vulnerabilities. And when you're not doing those things, thinking through those things in awareness, you are definitely managing them in an unaware place, because
Right.
it's not that they're not taking place, right? If you don't know boundaries, you've never set them, and you're not thinking about them, they have been set. They are there. They're in a subconscious, unaware place. And maybe you're not aware of the way that they're contributing to your relationships, but they are definitely there.
Certainly.
So having these conversations, it's not like if I don't talk about my boundaries, they're not there. So you owe it to yourself to look at the relationships you have and see what boundaries you've already put in place with your unconscious behaviors, and start to make more aware decisions around the structure that you need to prioritize your energy and your value. And that really, CharLea, isn't that kind of self-love and self-regulation?
Oh, absolutely. It's an act of self-love to understand that you do have needs, that they are valuable, and to put yourself in situations where they can be met. Whether that is an independent thing, which most of the things you need may be, but certainly, things like the maladaptive behaviors show up like control. It shows up in you having those high expectations of other people and yourself, so much so that it comes at a detriment to you. And, it all stems from the few times that whatever the need is or whatever is trying to be avoided um, wasn't avoided and was felt. And it's an act of trying to avoid the feelings. And it's so important that we do make sure that we're checking in like you stated, and also just being aware that feeling your feelings is also a form of self-care like you're saying. um, and a lot of times that does mean that you lose something, whether that is you lose out on hanging out with XYZ people, or you lose out on maybe certain things that you expected other people to show up as. And oftentimes that does open the door for opportunities for that to be the case, but it's hard to see at the time, certainly.
Oh gosh, for sure. I would agree. As somebody newly aware, I would say in the last 6 months, how unconscious boundaries have contributed to my relationships, really good relationships and some challenging relationships. And now being more aware of the structure that I need to keep in order to better manage my energy and my focus and myself. Um, Looking at the outcomes of these relationships, there's a sense of loss, a sense of grief, a sense of why was I doing this? I wish I showed up differently. And I probably brought a little bit of shame to it, I'll be honest with you. But I think a couple of months in, what I would say, and I've still, a lot of this information is structurally new to me, I would say is once you get past maybe some of that shame and the fear of boundaries and wanting to really better manage or regulate that energy and um, show up for yourself, there is opportunity, right? It's like
Mhm.
your greatest opportunity lies just on the other side of the thing you're avoiding. You see those quotes a lot, right? And um, I would say to anyone that's struggling, that maybe is beginning to be more aware of these habits and coping, that yes, it's probably going to hurt for a little while first, but as soon as you start to accept those, maybe change your behaviors, you're going to start to see possibilities and opportunities. At least that's my experience.
Thank you for being open and vulnerable and sharing that, Steph. I know you mentioned there might have been some shame there, but vulnerability opposes shame. So you're good. You're working on it. And just to wrap up, I'll go ahead and give an example with how to go ahead and set boundaries. It's just so that listeners have something tangible to work with. So, for example, we'll talk about wanting to wake up at a certain time. Um, So again, starting with the why. Why do we want to wake up at a certain time? It's for whatever reason. Specifically for me, it's because I do like to have um, a couple hours or at least an hour to myself in the morning, especially because I'm in a field of service. So there is a lot of time that I give to other people. It's important that I get that time first in order to have a day that I'm not contributing to burning out. So, but there are other factors that come with waking up on time. The starting small is also an important factor in setting clear boundaries. And when I say start small, I mean like you probably can't jump from waking up at 9 o'clock to waking up at 4 o'clock, at least not without some extreme bouts of drowsiness and affecting the following day. But what you can do is maybe go to bed an hour earlier to then wake up an hour earlier. And again, making those goals attainable. It's okay to be flexible. There's gonna be random times that your great aunt is having a birthday dinner and you're not going to be home in time to go to bed at that set time. There's some flexibility there, but also, realize what the cost is. So maybe you can attend it, but you go home early. Or, maybe there's a different way that you can show up for these external things that are affecting the night before you trying to meet your goal. And that's where the boundary comes in. So again, a simple boundary is because I want to wake up at 6 a.m., I will not go to activities or I will try not to go to activities that start after 9 p.m. Let's say that. So let's say this get together, family dinner, what have you, um, for your great aunt or whomever starts at 7. Perfect. You can still make that attainably within your boundaries. You're still meeting your goal and everything is fine. But if that dinner starts at 9, well, now you have some thinking to do. Is this a time to be flexible? Or is this a time to follow through and make sure that your upcoming day, your tomorrow, is on track because you made a decision about keeping your boundary for tonight?
Yeah, I didn't think about boundaries related to time management. I immediately went to relationship. But you're right, time management is a way you manage your energy and your presence. So it's obviously a really good example. And that boundaries could be also about investing in other people, but also about investing in yourself. And everyone probably needs both.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you're saying in twofold here, that there could be other ways that you can show up that is not going to affect your boundaries. So maybe it's you send your gift, or maybe it's I can't make it to that dinner, but I'd love to take you out to lunch or something of the sort. To not say like you can't do any of the things that you're wanting to do, but you can adapt them to fit within your boundaries. As well, Steph, I also did not think about boundaries in other settings, but the Very Well Health website highlights boundaries on physical, sexual, intellectual, and mental, emotional, marital, and financial, as well as time, being the settings that they offered. And they do talk further about some different types of boundaries there. And I'll be sure to post the link to this website so that people can refer back just on all the information that is here. Because by no means can I deliver the how to from A to Z in one podcast episode. But certainly, it's a great way to start the conversation and reflection on where some of those rigid and loose boundaries can add some structure and become healthier boundaries.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks so much for those definitions. And it's exciting to have new ways to think about the ways I show up.
Awesome. And check us out on our socials. I'll be sure to compile some sort of list that can help with getting to know yourself and your boundaries, and add this practice to something that is a part of your routine. As always, the conversation does not end here.
We want to know your thoughts on these topics. Join us on Instagram at Quarter Life Lessons Pod to share your perspectives and continue the conversation to thrive.
Thank you for tuning in to the Quarter Life Lessons podcast. Find new episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and our Buzzsprout website.